You birthed them, so it's your responsibility to raise them. The husband emptied all the funds from the bank card, settling his parents' debt, leaving his wife and their 3 children penniless. However, that evening, the mother-in-law entered the house, clutching some papers and a slight smirk on her face. And before we continue, please let us know which country you're watching this video from. Enjoy listening. Olga stirred her cool tea with a spoon, gazing out the window. Outside, a fine autumn rain drizzled, mirroring her mood. The room, cluttered with children's toys and coloring books, held a semblance of peace. The children, exhausted from their day's play, slept soundly, but this quiet was deceptive, like thin ice on a frozen river. A silence before the storm. 3 children born close together, a source of both joy and an endless stream of worries. After the birth of her youngest son, Olga never left her maternity leave. First one child was sick, then another. And so, for 3 years, she lived in this perpetual cycle. Diapers, baby food, playgrounds, bedtime stories. Igor worked, brought in money, but with each passing month, there was less of it. First, an urgent project, then a salary delay. Olga tried not to create tension, understanding that times were tough for everyone, but the anxiety grew, like a snowball rolling downhill. They lived in her apartment, inherited from her grandmother. Before marriage, Olga felt like the mistress of her domain, independent and self-assured. She worked, earning a decent living, traveled. Then Igor appeared, followed by their wedding and children. And now, here she was, a homemaker, living in the shadow of her husband and his parents. Igor's parents had temporarily moved in with them when Olga was in her final months of pregnancy with their 3rd child, offering help with the children and support for the young family. Olga was grateful, but with each passing day, their assistance became more intrusive. The mother-in-law, Galina Petrovna, felt it her duty to offer advice on every matter: how to feed, how to dress, how to raise children. The father-in-law, Petr Vasilyevich, monitored the family budget and criticized Olga for her spending. Olga tried to gently assert her viewpoint but was met with a wall of misunderstanding. "You're on maternity leave," Igor would often say. "You're not working, so focus on the children. We know what's best." Igor spent more and more time with his parents discussing various matters. Olga felt like an outsider in her own home. She realized that Igor was increasingly falling under his father's influence. Petr Vasilyevich was an authoritarian man, accustomed to controlling everything. He always believed he knew better how life should be lived, and now he was actively helping Igor shape their family life. In the evening, Igor returned home later than usual, tired but pleased. He pecked Olga on the cheek and went to the kitchen, where his mother was already busy. Olga felt a pang of jealousy. She wished Igor would talk to her, ask about her day, but he seemed to not notice her. After dinner, Igor sat down at the computer. Olga watched him furtively. He was intently studying something on the screen, then frowned and began typing rapidly. Suddenly he jumped up and left the room, slamming the door loudly. Olga grew worried. She approached the computer and opened the browser history. Among numerous news and sports review sites, her gaze landed on an online banking page. Olga clicked on it mechanically. Her personal account page opened. Olga went cold. She couldn't believe her eyes. The amount in the account was significantly less than it should have been. She frantically began checking the statements. Large sum transfers appeared, one after another, all to the same account. Petr Vasilyevich's account. Olga felt her breath catch in her throat. This was the money she had been saving for the children's future, for their education, for a home, for emergencies. Money she had saved by depriving herself of everything. She rushed to Igor. He was sitting in the living room with his father, engaged in lively discussion. Seeing Olga, Igor fell silent and guiltily lowered his eyes. What was this all about? Olga struggled to contain her anger. She showed Igor the printout of the bank transactions. "Where did you put the money?" Igor remained silent. Petr Vasilyevich looked at Olga haughtily. "I took the money," Igor finally stammered. "My father had problems with his Dasha loan. I decided to help." "You decided to help?" Olga couldn't believe her ears. You took my children's money and gave it to your father. Don't shout, Igor snapped back. Why are you so upset? The dacha is also for the family. We'll relax there. The dacha? You're thinking about the dacha when we have 3 children? Olga was beside herself with rage. Have you ever thought about them? About me? You're being too dramatic, Petr Vasilievich intervened. Money is transient. The main thing is family. Family? Olga gave a bitter laugh. What family? You've taken everything from me. My money, my freedom, my self-confidence. You've turned me into a dependent housewife. Ungrateful, Galina Petrovna hissed, appearing in the doorway. We only wish you well. Well? Olga looked at her mother-in-law with hatred. You've destroyed my life. You birthed them, so raise them, Igor said coldly, turning away. These words were the last straw. Olga felt something break inside her. She could no longer endure, no longer remain silent, no longer live in this nightmare. She turned and silently walked out of the room. Igor and his parents exchanged glances. They didn't understand what was happening. They were accustomed to Olga always yielding, always agreeing, but this time everything was different. Olga had made a decision. A strange calm settled within her, contrasting with the storm that had raged just yesterday. Silence became her weapon as she contemplated each step. Igor, accustomed to her submissiveness, didn't notice the change. He continued to drone on about his parents' loan, the dacha, and how everything would be all right. Olga listened distractedly, gathering the shattered pieces of her past faith in their shared future. The children needed protection, and she intended to provide it. In the morning after Igor left for work, Olga resolutely dialed her mother's number. Upon hearing her daughter's trembling voice, Tatiana Sergeyevna immediately understood. Something serious has happened. Olga, struggling to hold back tears, recounted the missing money, the loan, and the pressure from Igor's parents. Mom, I don't know what to do, Olga whispered, feeling small and helpless. Hold on, my darling, Tatiana Sergeyevna replied in a firm voice. I'll be there tomorrow. Don't say anything to Igor. Just wait. The next day, early in the morning, the doorbell rang. After feeding the children breakfast, Olga opened the door with a sinking heart. At the threshold stood Tatiana Sergeyevna, a tall, stately woman with a piercing gaze. In her hands, she held a thick folder. She appeared composed and determined, just as she had been when she worked as a notary. Hello, Olenka, Tatiana Sergeyevna said, embracing her daughter. Well, are you going to show me the battlefield? Upon entering the apartment, Tatiana Sergeyevna immediately assessed the situation. She saw the weariness in Olga's eyes and felt the tension hanging in the air. Igor's parents, hearing the noise, came out into the hallway. Petr Vasilievich, Igor's father, looked at the guest haughtily. Tatiana Sergeyevna, what brings you here? He asked with feigned politeness. I've come to help my daughter, Tatiana Sergeyevna replied curtly, ignoring his tone. We have something to discuss privately. Petr Vasilievich frowned, but said nothing. He knew Tatiana Sergeyevna was a woman of character. Together with Olga, they went into her room. Tatiana Sergeyevna sat at the table and opened the folder. Inside were documents, bank statements, copies of certificates. Tell me everything from the beginning, Tatiana Sergeyevna requested, putting on her glasses. Olga began to speak disjointedly and hastily, but gradually calmed down under her mother's attentive gaze. She spoke about the apartment, the account opened in the children's names, the pressure from Igor's parents, and his irresponsibility. Tatiana Sergeyevna listened attentively, making notes in her notepad. Then she asked Olga to show her the apartment documents and the account statements. The apartment is registered in your name, isn't it? Tatiana Sergeyevna stated after examining the ownership certificate. And the account is also in your name. That's good. It gives us options. What options? Olga asked hopefully. We can protect your interests and those of your children, Tatiana Sergeyevna replied. Igor has made a serious mistake, and he must answer for it. Tatiana Sergeyevna began explaining Olga's rights. She spoke about the possibility of a prenuptial agreement, filing for alimony, and evicting Igor's parents from the apartment. Prenuptial agreement, alimony. But we're family, Olga said confusedly. Family, Olenka, is when people care for each other and respect each other, Tatiana Sergeyevna replied. And Igor, unfortunately, behaved irresponsibly and selfishly. We must protect you and your children. Tatiana Sergeyevna took several sheets of paper from the folder. This is a draft of a prenuptial agreement, she explained. It states that all property acquired before marriage remains your property. This is an application for alimony, and this is a lawsuit for the eviction of Igor's parents. Read everything carefully and tell me what you think. Olga took the documents and began to read. The words seemed alien and frightening. Prenuptial agreement, alimony, eviction. Had her life truly come to this? I don't know, Mom, Olga whispered, putting the papers down. I'm scared. I understand, my darling, Tatiana Sergeyevna replied, hugging her. But you are not alone. I am with you. We will do everything correctly. Together, they began to discuss each point of the documents. Tatiana Sergeyevna patiently explained the legal nuances to Olga, helping her understand that she had the right to protection and support. Most importantly, Tatiana Sergeyevna emphasized, is to open a separate bank account in your name and transfer all child benefits there. Igor should not have access to these funds. Olga nodded. She understood this was necessary. Tatiana Sergeyevna helped her draft the application for opening the account and explained how to transfer the money. We'll take care of that tomorrow, Tatiana Sergeyevna said. And now, rest. You need to gather your strength. In the evening, when Igor returned from work, Olga was silent. She prepared dinner, fed the children, and went to her room. Igor tried to talk to her, but she answered in monosyllables and avoided his gaze. What's wrong? Igor asked, frowning. You're acting strangely today. Nothing, Olga replied, turning back to the window. Just tired. Igor shrugged and went to watch television with his parents. Olga listened to their laughter and felt resentment and anger growing in her heart. The next morning, while Igor was at work, Olga and Tatiana Sergeyevna went to the bank. They opened an account in Olga's name and transferred all the child benefits there. Now Olga had her own financial safety net. She felt a little more confident and stronger. Upon returning home, Olga saw that Igor's parents were engaged in an animated conversation. Peter Vasilievich, noticing Olga, looked at her haughtily. So, how are things? He asked mockingly. Still sulking at Igor? Olga remained silent. She didn't want to get into an argument with him. Tatiana Sergeyevna, standing nearby, calmly replied, Everything is fine. Thank you for your concern. In the evening, when Igor returned from work, Tatiana Sergeyevna took a folder of documents from her bag and placed it on the table. Olga watched her mother, feeling both relief and anxiety. Igor sat on the sofa, engrossed in his phone. The children, as usual, were noisy around them, playing with toy cars on the carpet. Igor, we need to talk, Tatiana Sergeyevna said calmly. Her voice, despite its softness, sounded firm and confident. Igor looked up from his phone, frowning. What's happened? Did you mess up again? He retorted, glancing at Olga. No, Igor, this concerns you, Tatiana Sergeyevna replied, gesturing for him to sit at the table. He reluctantly stood up and sat opposite, his suspicious gaze fixed on Olga's mother. Tension hung in the air, palpable enough to be felt physically. Olga seated the children at the table, turning on cartoons for them to distract them slightly from the unfolding events. Tatiana Sergeyevna placed the folder of documents in front of Igor. This is an official notification, she said, without going into detail. Igor, not understanding what it was about, opened the folder and began to scan the papers. At first, he merely furrowed his brows in confusion, but gradually his face changed, taking on an expression of bewilderment and then of horror. The documents contained copies of the alimony application, a prenuptial agreement drafted retroactively to protect Olga's interests, and eviction notices for his parents. What does this mean? He croaked, looking up at Olga. It means you no longer have access to our children's money, which you so generously gave to your father, Olga replied. Her voice was even and calm, but her eyes held hurt and disappointment. It means I will no longer allow you to dictate my life or the future of my children. Igor tried to object, but Tatiana Sergeyevna interrupted him. All documents are legally compliant. The apartment belongs to Olga, and she has every right to dispose of her property. The prenuptial agreement protects her interests and those of the children. As for your parents, Igor, they are residing here without legal grounds and will have to vacate the premises within the specified time. You can't do this, Igor exclaimed, addressing Olga. We're a family. How can you do this to me? Family, Olga scoffed. You only remembered family now, when you were secretly taking money meant for our children. Did you think of family? When you allowed your parents to humiliate me and interfere in our lives, did you think of family? Igor turned pale. He realized the situation had spiraled out of control. He was used to Olga always conceding to him, to her being soft and compliant. But now a different woman stood before him, strong, self-assured, and ready to fight for her future and the future of her children. I didn't know it was this serious, Igor muttered, trying to justify himself. I thought my father would return the money as soon as he could. I didn't want to hurt you. You always say that, Igor, Olga replied, her voice sounding weary. You always say you didn't want to, but in the end, things only get worse. I can't live like this anymore. I want my children to grow up in a normal environment where they are loved and respected, not used as bargaining chips. Igor's parents, hearing the commotion, emerged from their room. Seeing the documents in Igor's hands and the tense faces of Olga and Tatiana Sergeyevna, they immediately understood something had happened. What is going on here? Asked Petr Vasilievich, Igor's father, in his authoritative tone. Tatiana Sergeyevna turned to him. What's going on here is what should have happened a long time ago, she replied. Your son has made a mistake, and now he will pay for it. And you, Petr Vasilievich, and you, Galina Petrovna. She shifted her gaze to Igor's mother. We'll have to leave this apartment. You have time to pack. You have no right to speak to us like this, Petr Vasilievich blustered. We helped you with the children, we supported you, and you treat us like this. Helped, Tatiana Sergeyevna scoffed. You interfered in our lives. You controlled our every move. You humiliated my daughter. Is that what you call help? As for support, I've seen nothing from you but criticism and dissatisfaction. Galina Petrovna tried to intercede for her husband, but Tatiana Sergeyevna cut her off with a gesture. I am not going to argue with you. You have time to pack. If you do not leave the apartment voluntarily, I will be forced to go to court. Petr Vasilievich turned purple with anger. He was used to everyone obeying him, to always getting his way, but now he faced a woman who was not afraid of him and was ready to fight back. Igor stood with his head bowed, listening silently to the argument. He felt crushed. He understood that he was to blame for everything. He had succumbed to his parents' influence. He had failed to protect his wife and children. He had made a mistake that could cost him his family. Olga, please give me a chance, he pleaded, addressing his wife. I'll fix everything. I'll return the money. I'll apologize to your mother. I'll do whatever you say. Olga looked at him with a long, piercing gaze. There was so much pain, disappointment, and weariness in her eyes that Igor felt afraid. He realized he had lost her trust, and regaining it would be very difficult, if not impossible. I'll think about it, Olga replied, turning away from him. But for now, I want you to leave. I don't want to see you. Igor, head down, left the room. He felt empty and lost. He understood that he stood on the brink of a new life, and what it would be depended solely on him. Tatiana Sergeyevna put her arm around Olga's shoulders. Don't worry, darling, she said. Everything will be all right. You are strong, you will manage, and I will always be here to support you. Olga pressed against her mother, feeling tears welling up in her throat. The next day, Olga filed for alimony in court. She also began the process of preparing documents for the eviction of Igor's parents. She was determined and had no intention of backing down. And Petr Vasilievich and Galina Petrovna, Igor's parents, stood in the middle of the living room, surrounded by their suitcases and boxes. Tatiana Sergeyevna, with her characteristic composure, watched them, standing by the door. Olga stood a little further away, arms crossed, as if observing a performance. "How can you do this to our son?" Petr Vasilievich roared, addressing Olga. "We always helped you, always supported you." "Supported?" Olga scoffed. "You only supported yourselves and your son. My interests, my children's interests, never concerned you." Galina Petrovna tried to intervene, grabbing Olga's arm. "Olechka, think! Where will we go? We're old." Olga pulled her arm away. "Did you have somewhere to go? Before you forced Igor to give you my children's money. Now find another place." Tatiana Sergeyevna stepped forward. "Petr Vasilievich, Galina Petrovna, I understand this is difficult for you now, but the law is the law. You are residing in my daughter's apartment without any right to do so. You must leave. Otherwise, we will be forced to go to court." Petr Vasilievich snorted contemptuously. "Court? I have everything arranged there. You'll regret crossing me." "I don't think so," Tatiana Sergeyevna replied calmly. "I have connections too, and believe me, I'm not afraid to use them." After these words, Igor's parents, muttering curses, began to carry out their belongings. Olga watched them, feeling a strange mix of relief and guilt. She knew she was doing the right thing by protecting herself and her children, but she felt sorry for the elderly couple finding themselves in this situation. Igor, like a shadow, watched the events unfold from the hallway. He tried to say something, to explain something, but Olga turned away from him, unwilling to listen to his excuses. She knew all his words were just empty promises, meant to appease her anger. When Igor's parents finally carried out the last box, silence fell upon the apartment. A heavy, oppressive silence, like a harbinger of a storm. Olga looked at Tatiana Sergeyevna, seeking support. Her mother embraced her, pulling her close. "Everything will be all right, darling," she whispered. "You are strong. You will manage." Igor realized that the situation had gotten out of control. He could no longer influence what was happening. All his attempts to persuade Olga, to appeal to pity, to play on guilt, yielded no results. She seemed to have become a different person, a strong, self-assured woman, ready to fight for her happiness and the well-being of her children. That same evening, after the children were asleep, Olga gathered her courage and summoned Igor for a talk. She knew this conversation would not be easy, but it was necessary to clear the air. "Igor," she began, trying to remain calm, "I want you to understand that it's over between us." Igor tried to object, but Olga stopped him with a hand. "I can no longer trust you. You have betrayed me. You have betrayed our children. You handed over our funds to your parents, fully aware of our immediate need for them. You prioritized their well-being over ours. I find that unforgivable." "But I was only trying to do what was best," Igor exclaimed. "I wanted to assist my parents." "Or did you simply want to please them, Igor?" Olga countered. "You always valued their opinions above mine. You never considered me, my feelings. I can no longer live like this." Igor lowered his head. He recognized the truth in Olga's words. He had indeed consistently sought to appease his parents, even at the expense of his own family. He saw himself as weak, immature, incapable of making independent choices. "What can I do to earn your forgiveness?" he asked, his gaze fixed on Olga with a flicker of hope. "Nothing," Olga replied. "Forgiveness is a lengthy and intricate journey, and I'm uncertain if I'll ever reach that point. However, I am willing to offer you an opportunity to demonstrate that you can transform, a chance to become a true father to our children." Olga laid down her terms. Igor was to commence child support payments, attend therapy sessions, and complete a course of family counseling. He had to prove through tangible actions his readiness for change and his commitment to taking responsibility for his life. Igor agreed to every condition. He understood this was his final opportunity. He was prepared to do whatever it took to regain the trust of Olga and their children. A few days later, Igor moved out of the apartment. He rented a small room on the outskirts of town. He recognized that his life had irrevocably changed and that he would have to rebuild from the ground up. Following Igor's departure, Olga redirected her focus towards her children and her career. She strived to cultivate a stable and joyful environment for them. She understood that numerous challenges lay ahead, but she felt prepared to face them.